participants to mute their mic. Okay, so a very warm welcome to this important event, 45th Gopalan Oration Award function, and very hearty congratulations to the recipient, Dr. V. Mohan. I mean, we are extremely happy and proud that the most celebrated diabetologist and internationally renowned diabetologist is the recipient of this very prestigious award. For a few people who do not know, this Dr. Gopalan was a director of NIM from 61 to 73, I mean, before most of us were even born. And then he also proceeded to become Director General of the Indian Council of Medical Research. And during his time, many national programs evolved, like vitamin A supplementation program and ICDS program also, because lots of data were generated in the country and also from NIM, and they all synthesized and recommended to the government. And one such program was a professional body was set up by Dr. Gopalan that time, which actually evaluated all the then evidence that was available then. That committee recommended iron supplementation program for control of anemia. So that is when the iron and folic acid supplementation program evolved. So that way, Dr. Gopalan, through NIM as well as through this professional society, that is Nutrition Society of India, contributed significantly to most of the nutrition programs that are currently running in India. And India is known for having some of the most robust nutrition programs in the whole world. Globally also, we are the ones who have very, very massive nutrition programs. Then Nutrition Society of India completed 50 years when National Institute of Nutrition completed 100 years. And during the same time, that was in 2018, during the same time, Dr. Gopalan completed 100 years. He celebrated his 100th birthday in 2018. And 2019, unfortunately, I mean, he passed away, and even still, he remains live in our memory. So right from its inception, he founded the NSI, and right from its inception, he was the guiding force behind NSI. I still remember when he was, retired long back, I think he was somewhere around 96 years old. He used to come and attend the society programs religiously, right from morning to evening, sitting in the front row, along with Dr. Vinodini Reddy. So that was his passion for the society as well as for the institute, NIM. So with these words, I welcome all the participants, the conveners, the chapter conveners, all the executive committee members, and all the NSI as well as the NIM scientists who are very, very keen to hear the golden words from Dr. V. Mohan. I mean, we know he's the extreme in the diabetics, he's the number one in diabetes specialist, but still hearing from him directly, especially through this program, is a wonderful opportunity, and we are all ears for that. Once again, I extend a very warm welcome to this celebrated speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. And that was our NSI president, director of NIM, Dr. Hemlata ma'am. We now move on to the next section where the NSI secretary, Dr. Lakshmaya, scientist G at ICMR NIM, will tell us about the award.
Dr. Lakshmaya.
Yeah. So good evening, everyone. Respected President NSI, other executive members. So I am very proud to read out about award. So the Gopalan Award was instituted in the 1974 by the Nutrition Society of India in honor of its founder, President Dr. C. Gopalan, who has been the guiding force behind the society since its inception. In his capacity as the founder president and as a permanent executive member, Dr. C. Gopalan has nurtured the society and brought its shape into a present stature. And the NSI currently bears a testimony to his intellect and father of nutritional science of India. And Dr. Gopalan was the founder president of Nutrition Foundation of India. He was a scientist of international eminence and has spearheaded the cause of nutrition science for over 4 decades. His contribution towards the betterment of nutrition of population has benefited not only India, but also developing countries as well. NSI has helped to strengthen and inspire movements for the eradication of undernutrition among the underprivileged population in the third world countries. Dr. Gopalan had a brilliant academic career at the Madras Medical College, obtained a doctoral degree in medicine, and during his illustrious career, Dr. Gopalan has held several prestigious positions with distinction that has brought fame not only his, but also to our country. He was the first Asian to be elected as the president of the International Union of Nutritional Sciences, IUNS, and the first chairman of the Regional Advisory Committee on Medical Research for Southeast Asia of WHO, World Health Organization. He was on several World Health Organization expert panels for many years and was the chairman of the technical session of the World Health Assembly. And he was elected fellow of the Royal Society of London. He was also the first Nuffield Foundation fellow from India in Medical Research Council of United Kingdom and a Rockefeller Founder Fellow. And the National Institute of Nutrition, Hyderabad, India was nurtured by Dr. C. Gopalan with utmost dedication as director from 1960 to 1974, 14 years. And Dr. Gopalan was also responsible for forging a fraternity of Asian nutrition scientists, initiating the first Asian Congress of Nutrition and promoting subsequent ones, which lead to formation of the Federation of Asian Nutrition Societies, FANS, and he is an able administrator and a visionary during his tenure as the director of NIN and later as the Director General of the ICMR. The country as a whole focused its attention on nutritional and medical problems of public health importance. Under his leadership, a wealth of nutrition information was generated to tackle public health nutrition problems such as protein energy malnutrition, vitamin A deficiency, phrinoderma, latherism, fluorosis, pellagra, etc. So the establishment of the National Nutrition Monitoring Bureau was laid by him, and unfortunately these were terminated now. So Dr. Gopalan has also established the Nutrition Foundation of India, which is also carrying out a wide interdisciplinary research work in the country. And some of the renowned national and international honors bestowed on for his outstanding contributions, including Dr. B.C. Rai National Award in 1974, Dhanvantari Award in 1978, WHO Health for All Medical 1988, Sir C.V. Raman Gold Medal of the Indian National Science Academy in 1988, International Union of Nutrition Sciences Award in 1989, R.D. Birla Award in 1990, and Fellow of the International Union of Nutrition Sciences in 1993, and ICMR NN Centenary Award in 2018. He was also conferred the prestigious civilian awards Padma Shri in 1970 and Padma Bhushan in 2003 by the Government of India. He also received a Living Legend Awards from International Union of Nutritional Sciences in 2003 and Federation of Asian Nutrition Societies, FANS, in 2019. Dr. C. Gopalan passed away after 100 fruitful years of life on 3rd October 2019. The Gopalan Oration Award is given every year to an expert who has made significant contribution in the field of nutrition and allied sciences. So the Nutrition Society of India is now proud to announce that the 45th Gopalan Oration will be delivered by Dr. V. Mohan, Chairman and Chief of Diabetology, and Dr. Mohan's Diabetes Specialities Center and Madras Diabetes Research Foundation, Chennai, India, on the topic the diabetes epidemic in India. Some lessons learned. So he is delivering on this topic. So thank you and congratulations, sir, for award. Thank you.
May I now request Dr. Kamala Krishna Swamy, member of Gopalan Oration Trust and former director of NIM, to introduce the orator. Madam.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Good afternoon, everybody. I consider it a great privilege to present Dr. Vishwanathan Mohan, our nation's leading expert and giant in the field of diabetes, who will be delivering the oration. Sir, the society is deeply honored by you accepting our invitation. Congratulations, Dr. Mohan. He is a proficient clinician, a passionate researcher, a dexterous administrator, and a very competent institution builder. And above all, a humanitarian with a charitable bent of mind, helping the impoverished segments of the population. As already Lakshmaya put it across, he is the chairman and chief of Diabetology at Madras Diabetes Specialities Center, which is a premier institute at Chennai and is recognized by International Diabetes Federation as Center of Excellence in Diabetes Care and Education. The center has also been designated as a WHO Collaborative Center for Non-Communicable Diseases and Advanced Research Center for Diabetes by ICMR. Dr. Mohan masterminds a chain of 50 diabetic clinics, or 51 perhaps, spread over 8 states of India and manages more than 500,000 diabetic cases here. He is also the president and director of Madras Diabetes Research Foundation, which is Asia's largest and exclusive diabetes research center in this region. His main research interests are epidemiology of diabetes and its complications, genomics of diabetes, including monogenic variant and type 1 diabetes, food, nutrition, and dietetics research, precision diabetes, as well as fibrocalculus pancreatic disease. He is a very active entrepreneur, developing evidence-based health and wellness foods as well. Dr. Mohan received the prestigious National Award of Padma Shri in 2012 for his all-encompassing contributions. He is the first doctor from India who has been profiled in Lancet for the first time. For a person who has set his heart on poetry and English literature, reflecting his creative ability, entering a medical school itself is incredible. His father, Professor Dr. M. Vishwanathan, a well-known as father of diabetology, made him change his mind to pursue medicine. He had a brilliant career, both before and after entering medical college, with laurels to his credit in all subjects, and was awarded Dr. R.V. Rajam Gold Medal for standing first in MD in Madras University. Dr. Mohan's hard work, dedication, coupled with inspiration and passion along with his spouse, late Dr. Rema Mohan, a multidisciplinary center well equipped for treatment of diabetes and its complication was established. He is a visionary and holds multiple perspectives, all of which pivoted the development of the organization to achieve excellence in therapy. Only a very talented, ambitious individual with perhaps great leadership skills can achieve what Dr. Mohan has established in a very short span of time. He has the necessary skills to navigate challenges very effectively. He stands tall as a hallmark of modest and flexible governance while being an able administrator and mentor. Everyone appreciates his team building abilities with focus not only on the IQ, but also the EQ in all, establishing a culture of mutual trust. As a mentor, he improves critical thinking skills, research abilities, and communication. The MDRF, of course, focuses its attention on epidemiology, clinical research, clinical trials, basic sciences, and as national and international collaborations as well, either with universities, public health schools, or hospitals. Apart from the urban-rural epidemiology studies in Chennai from 2000, which is generating voluminous data to this day, there are two large global epidemiological studies, the cardiometabolic risk reduction in Asian countries, and the prospective urban-rural epidemiology in 27 countries, which are of pronounced significance. MDRF is recognized by Madras University, Tamil Nadu Dr. MGR Medical University, University of Warwick, UK, and Deakin and Melbourne universities in Australia for PhD degree. The vibrant educational academy trains doctors and paramedical persons and offers certificate and diplomas on evidence-based diabetes management, gestational diabetes in retinopathies, and technology in diabetes, as well as there is a bachelor's degree in medical laboratory techniques. Diabetes in rural India is a neglected disease. As all of us know, many of the things in rural areas are neglected. Therefore, to promote awareness, accessible and affordable care, a rural diabetics project has been implemented in 42 villages with a population of about 50,000. Telemedicine services are made available with a mobile unit to screen for diabetes and its complications. This is being supported by World Diabetes Foundation and ISRO. It includes free therapy for deserving patients in about 25 villages. He is a magnanimous person providing lifelong free service to over 10,000 patients in different walks of life through the hospitals and free clinics, 2 with Sri Satya Sai organization, and one more in his father's name for free checkup as well. And for over 10,000 auto drivers, free checkup and treatment is provided. He's a voracious reader and very prolific writer, and started writing while he was at medical school. He has authored more than 1,500 publications, of which 2/3 are original research articles in peer-reviewed, high-impact journals, satisfying his literary drive. He has over 153,000 citations with truly exceptional H index of 138. In addition, he has 400 reviews, articles, invited editorials, 200 chapters in textbooks on diabetes and internal medicine published in India and abroad. He has authored 17 books and 2 social books and 8 spiritual books on Satya Sai Baba, suggesting his spiritual inclination. He is ranked among top 2% of scientists in the world and highest ranked scientists in Tamil Nadu by Stanford University, and among top 0.1% of researchers in type 2 diabetes by Expertscape Department. He is skilled in multitasking and succeeds to find time for additional such as editor, associate editor, member of editorial board, and referee for several journals of repute, more than 25, I think. He is one of the core group members of WHO and IDF. He is a trust member of Sri Satya Sai Central Trust and Sri Satya Sai Global Council and Institute of Higher Learning as well. He has several accolades and honors. On an average, 2 or 3 per year, maybe around 200 awards. I will not be able to read out everything, but the important among them is the prestigious Dr. B.C. Roy National Award by the Medical Council of India and Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Centenary Award, the highest award for biomedical research given by ICMR. He is the only Indian to receive Dr. Harold Rifkin Distinguished International Service in the Cause of Diabetes Award by the American Diabetic Association. He is a worldwide traveler. He has several prestigious positions in several academia and institutes of reference. He has been honored with several fellowships from academic bodies. A few of them I would like to mention: Indian College of Physicians, Madras Science Foundation, National Academy of Sciences, Allahabad, International Medical Science Academy, Indian National Science Academy, Indian Academy of Sciences, and Royal Society of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene, UK, American College of Endocrinology, and Master of College of Physicians, and the World Academy of Sciences. Last but not the least is the FRS from Royal Society of Edinburgh. But Dr. Mohan is very energetic on social media as well. and has a large follow, or a galaxy of followers, I should say. It includes YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc. His thought-provoking and inspirational speeches and daily quotes on social media are extremely popular. Several groups have ranked his hospital as an outstanding specialty hospital, providing best diabetic care in India repeatedly on several occasions. His most recent book, an autobiography, Making Excellence a Habit, The Secret to Building a World-Class Healthcare System in India, published by Penguin India, is a very popular book and is in great demand. It speaks of his sustained efforts to fulfill his ambitions and dreams, focused approaches, and confidence to execute commitments to perfection, overcoming all obstacles. Alexander the Great said, I quote, "There is nothing impossible to they who will try," I unquote. Dr. Mohan perhaps is the right person to be emulated by all aspiring doctors and researchers. Our great pleasure inviting Dr. Mohan to receive the award from Dr. Hemalata, President of NSI, and deliver the oration. Thank you very much.
Okay, sorry. Thank you, madam, for that very comprehensive introduction of sir. Everyone knows him for his exceptional work, but today you've given us glimpses of his personal life as well. Thank you very much for that. We will now move on to the virtual presentation of the award. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Our director will display the award.
So here we have few members here. Myself and then Dr. Lakshmaya, Dr. Arlappa, we have Dr. Janaki, Dr. Prabhu, Dr. Srishwan, and so here it's a very beautiful design. We have a gold medal in the center, and it is flanked by silver twigs on either side. Beautifully designed. We are very privileged and proud to offer this to the. Once again, I would say internationally renowned diabetologists. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Congratulations, sir. Congratulations.
And we also have certificate.
Sir. This we will send by post, sir.
I wish we had a physical meeting.
So we now request you to take over the platform, sir.
Deliver.
Thank you very much. I think the first thing I'll do is to share my screen. Can you see it? Is it visible?
Yes, we can see.
Yes,
So you can see me and hear me. Okay. So first of all, a great, I can't tell you how much of a great honor it is to deliver this oration. I have delivered many orations in the past. But Professor C. Gopalan was somebody whom I had hero worshipped as a student, as a medical student. In fact, it will be surprising if I tell you all, those of you who are in nutrition, that as a medical student, one of the books which I read repeatedly was The Nutritive Value of Indian Foods. I loved every word of it. And therefore, it was not surprising that when the nutrition prize came along in Madras Medical College, nobody had even opened a book of nutrition. So I kind of hands down, I could win that award. But I also had the occasion to meet Professor Gopalan on more than 2 or 3 occasions. And I'll try to show you some of the glimpses of that before I get into this. And I would like to formally, first of all, thank, let me see this. Yes, formally thank Dr. Shashikaran, who was the one who called me about this oration, and of course, Dr. Hemalata and Dr. Lakshmaya and Dr. Kamala Krishnami Madam for this, I don't know how much of time she has spent in preparing this introduction. I was wondering at some point, who is she talking about? And then I have to pinch myself and say she's talking about me only. So I don't know whether I deserve all that she said. and of course to the organizing committee of the 45th Gopalan Memorial Oration and the Nutrition Society of India, and to NIN for this very, very great honor. And I'll tell you why it's such a great honor for me. But before that, I'd like to first of all thank a few people and then talk about Professor Gopalan. My late father was already mentioned a couple of times. He's a good friend of Professor Gopalan. And as Madam said, it was he who kind of steered me into medicine. I wanted to become a poet. I probably would have ended up as a very bad poet. So I think he was able to see that, I can do writing even in the medical field. And he is quite rightly called as the father of diabetology in India. But I'd be doing injustice if I didn't thank my classmate and later on my wife, Rema, who was my life partner, collaborator. And the second half of my life, the first half of my life was with my father. And the second half of my life, when we started off on our own, was entirely due to this lady who was the brain behind everything, the heart behind and the soul behind everything. There's a huge list of people I can't possibly thank. We are more than 1,500 people who work for us. But I must mention my daughter, Dr. Anjana, Dr. Anjit, my son-in-law, and of course, this whole team here. Of relevance to this audience is Dr. Sudha Vasudevan, Mr. Sudha Vasudevan, and all our nutrition team who would be, most of the work that I'm showing now will be from them. And that's, of course, our nutrition and dietetics research team. You can see Sudha there and Shobana and all others there. And these are our senior advisors. And Dr. Kamalakshmi, for the last several decades now, has been associated with us, guiding us. And Madam, it's your proper guidance which has taken us so far in the food and nutrition research. And also Dr. Ganesh Jeevan and Dr. Maleshi, and that's our food analysis team at our lab in Siruseri. But getting back to Dr. Gopalan, I would like to, of course, dedicate this talk to him because, I can't tell you how much I loved and respected Professor Gopalan, because to me, he was awe-inspiring. A person of his eminence, I don't know whether has been born in this land. And it is truly inspiring what he has done. And not surprisingly, he's referred to as the father of nutrition research in India. And these two books I told you about, this is a 1989 and then subsequent edition. But the one I had was a 1970s edition when I was a medical student. I think I bought every edition of this book. And I used to read it repeatedly, up and down, up and down. I used to read that back to front, front to back. I don't know why I was so interested in it, but I think it's a style of writing and knowing about Indian foods and my own love for him, that made me do that. And here are just two editions of this. I'm sure many of you in the audience will be associated with the later editions of these. Now, this is a letter which Professor Gopalan wrote to me on 25th of July 2006, 16 years ago. So he sent him some reprints of mine, and he wrote back promptly and said, I'm in touch with the progress on diabetes in your institution, and I'm glad to see that the seedling that my friend Professor Vishwanathan planted has indeed grown into a large tree. And then on May 3rd, 2010, as you can see, I preserved all these letters. In original, I have preserved all of them. So he wrote to me, inviting me to deliver the C. Ramachandran Memorial Lecture. And that is when I did come to the Nutrition Foundation of India and had personally, contact with him at that time. And again, I could spend a lot of quality time with him. And he talks about the nutrition transition and the extensive work that you have done. And of course, Dr. Prema Ramachandran had a large role to play in this and, in hosting me at NFI. And there he adds, your father, Dr. Vishwanathan, was a good friend of mine in the days when he was working with Dr. Paul at Stanley Hospital. I'm glad that you're following the excellent tradition sent by him. So every time he would take the effort to write to me and to have that personal touch, which coming from such a great man, to me was, a mark of humility and a great lesson for me. And then after I accepted the invitation, he wrote to me again and said, I'm very happy that you accepted our invitation. The date has now been finalized. You'll be delivering a lecture on 29th of November at 3 p.m. at the Nutrition Foundation of India. And I certainly remember that lecture and meeting him and Dr. Prema Ramachandran and Dr. Kamalakshmi and many of you, Dr. Shikhar and many others, I've happened to meet there. But this is, I think, a very, very special picture taken on 9th of December 2018, when I went to his home and met Malini Sheshadri there, and Dr. Radha Venkateshan made the connection for me, our head of genomics. And I spent a good half an hour to 1 hour with him. And it was amazing that although here and there he would lose a little thread, but then he so quickly brought it back. And he said, yes, Vishwanathan, diabetes. And then he started saying, diabetes is increasing very much in India, isn't it? And this is after his 100th birthday. After he celebrated the 100th birthday, I thought I'll go and see him. And he was so kind to receive me and spend a lot of quality time with him. And this picture I would value more than anything else. In fact, I had taken it on my phone, and that was an old phone, and I had saved it somewhere on the computer. I spent a good 2 hours trying to get this photograph, and I finally got it. And I said, oh my God, now I cannot, now I must save it somewhere where, you know, I'll be able to access it more easily. And I would treasure this photograph more than any other photo that I have taken recently. And then, of course, as was mentioned, unfortunately, a few months later, October 2019, we lost him, and the world lost a giant in the field. It's not just India's loss, but I think it was the loss of the whole world. Very rarely do men like Professor Gopalan walk on the earth. And for all of us who have been associated with him, I know all of you have been much more associated with him. I've been a silent admirer from the distance, but I think all of you have had the good fortune to work with him. And I've heard so many stories from Dr. Prema and from Dr. Kamala Krishnasamy and so on. What a great man, what a multifaceted person he was. Not just a scientist, not just a doctor, not just a nutritionist, but an administrator, humanitarian. He had so many facets, which I think I will continue to place him as one of the greatest people whom I have ever known as a professional in my field. With that introduction, I know the time is limited, so let me move on, but I'll come back to him in the end. And therefore, the topic, as Dr. Lakshmaya said, is the diabetes epidemic in India, some lessons learned. As you saw in the letters also, he had been talking about, and the last time I mentioned, and I met him also, he was talking about how the diabetes is increasing in India. So I thought that will be the best way to pay tribute to him. I have no conflict of interest to declare. All the funding for the studies comes from ICMR, biotechnology, and international funding. Let me start here, because 1972 was the year when I joined my father and started working with him on diabetes. And at that time, Professor Ahuja's ICMR multi-center study showed that in urban India, 2% of the adults had diabetes, and rural India is about 1%. Over the years, this increased. And as you can see, it started going into double figures. And then although these studies are done at different times, different places, the sampling is different, but the story is consistent, isn't it? 2%, 4, 5, 11, 12, 19, 22, 25. Now, this is 2015, and this is in 2 cities, Chennai and Delhi, where in 2015 itself, 7 years ago, already we are reaching a quarter of the population. Now, what is the age of this population tested? It's about 20 years of age, not above 40, 50, about 20 years of age. Already we have a quarter of people having diabetes. At age 50, 55 in the major cities, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Delhi, Chennai, Kolkata, Mumbai, and so on, almost 40-45% of people have diabetes, and another 30-35% have pre-diabetes, which means it's unusual to find an Indian who is 50-60 years old who at least does not have glucose intolerance like pre-diabetes and so on. To find a normal super control who has normal GTT at age 55-60 in India is rare. You have to really search to find. That's how prominent diabetes is. And you can see rural India is not far behind, also increasing very rapidly. Okay. Now, based on the studies which we have done subsequently, which I'm just going to show you, the numbers of people in India with diabetes today is put at 74 million. China, for some strange reason, they are saying this is the ideal figures, and they keep changing the figures every 2 years. Quite rapidly, they change the figures. I don't even know how they come up with these figures. But according to them, China has doubled the number of people with diabetes, which I don't for a moment believe at all, because all studies have shown that Indians have more prevalence of diabetes in whether it's in Malaysia or China or Mauritius or Singapore or anywhere. Indians are supposed to have a higher prevalence. But leaving that aside, in India itself, we have close to 75 million people, and that's supposed to go to 124 million in a few years from now. So we're talking about very large numbers of people with diabetes in India. Now, the data for all of this comes from a study which is called as the INDIAB study, the ICMR India Diabetes Study. And this study, I must admit, was a brainchild of my daughter, Dr. Anjana. Now, they always say that when you come to the next generation, they can see further because they're standing on your shoulders. And so she is now standing on my shoulders, could see much more. I could only think of Chennai and cures and cups and those kind of studies. She could see that the whole country needs to be studied. And I'll come back to a paper which is getting published this evening in a few hours, in a minute or so. So this study was actually conceived by her, and very kindly, when Professor Ganguly was the Director General, when I told him this idea that my daughter has this crazy idea of doing the whole country, he said, who said it's crazy? You do it. Ask her to do it and let her do the whole study. So that's how the INDIAB study was done, studying the whole country, 124,000 people, representative of India's 1.3 billion people. Now, the first paper, not first, it's about third or fourth paper, but this paper, when we finished 15 states, happy to state that we finished 30 states in India now. But when the halfway mark came, we published in Lancet Diabetes with Anjana as the first author, where we reported on the prevalence of diabetes and pre-diabetes in India. And what was kind of fairly new at that time, and I'll show you what's further new, was that the states with the lowest GDP, shown in blue here, had the lowest prevalence of diabetes. And as the GDP increased, you can see Tamil Nadu and Chandigarh coming here, the diabetes prevalence shown in red is also increasing. So fairly good correlation between the GDP and diabetes. Now remember, this is the first 15 states, and the study has taken 10 years to complete. In the next 15 states that we studied, the prevalence rates are much, much higher because diabetes is increasing every year. For example, Kerala state, Goa, Puducherry, and a few others, the whole state, now the prevalence of diabetes is over 20 to 25%. Earlier I mentioned that Chennai and Delhi are 25%. Now the whole state is about 20 to 25%. That's why I said that the number of 72 million and so on is very small. And clearly it must be more than 100 million people already in India now. But what was also very interesting from the INDIAB study was this point, which would have interested Professor Gopalan a lot. We always knew that in rich countries, the poor people had more diabetes, whereas in poor countries, the rich people had more diabetes. Now, if you look at the richer states here, now what's shown in pink here is the low socioeconomic status. What is shown in blue is the middle and the high income group. And you can see, as you go to the poorer states, you take Bihar, the rich people have more of diabetes. Take Jharkhand, the rich people have more of diabetes. But you take Chandigarh, it's the poor people who have more diabetes. And in Punjab, the poor people have more. Tamil Nadu, the poor people have more diabetes. Believe it or not, poor people now have more diabetes, type 2 diabetes, than rich people. Because rich people can look after themselves. They get their 10,000 steps. They're going to the gym. They're eating brown rice. They're eating vegetables. They're eating fruit. They're starting to exercise. They're worried about their figure. They know about their weight. They know everything to prevent diabetes. The poor people will only eat what they get, and they don't have time to exercise. And therefore, we are seeing this trend. And the INDIAB study was the first to show this reversal of the epidemiological trend even within India. And therefore, my daughter, I think, was absolutely right when she said, Papa, never study one city and extrapolate to the whole country, she said. I used to argue with her. We live in Chennai, we should study Chennai. She said, no, we live in Chennai, we do the whole of India. And I think she was right, because this increase in the prevalence in the poor people and so on would not have come out unless we study. There's so much heterogeneity even within India. India itself is not like one story. There's so many stories within India. And I think as nutritionists, you know that well. We have the highest prevalence of obesity. We also have the highest prevalence of undernutrition and malnutrition. Double burden of malnutrition within a country. And this is what is shown here. Now, let's look at the glycemic control. How well are we doing as far as control of diabetes? And I told you there's a paper coming out today which reflects this better. But this is an early paper where we looked at urban India, rural India, where we had the first 10 states or so. And we looked at how many had A1C below 7%. Turned out that only about 1/3, 30% in India had a HbA1c below 7%. If you look at the other end of the spectrum, those who had poor control, defined as HbA1c more than 9%, almost 40% of rural India and almost 32% of urban India had very poor control. Okay. And this is bad news. It means there's so much of work to be done. We all think we are controlling diabetes well. Far from the truth. We are not controlling diabetes well at all. 2/3 of people are not under control. And that's what was shown by the study, which I'm just going to show you. Now, this results in a huge burden of complications. If you look at coronary artery disease, peripheral vascular disease, retinopathy, nephropathy, neuropathy, we have urban data, we have rural data. And the numbers shown here are the millions of people who have one of these complications. For example, kidney disease, if you include microalbuminuria, more than 20 million people in India have diabetic kidney disease, at least microalbuminuria. Assuming that even 1/3 of them or 1/4 of them go into the end stage of complication, you're talking about 5 million, 6 million people who will need either dialysis or transplantation. Where are you going to get 6 million kidneys? You can't get 6,000 kidneys in India. Where are you going to get 6 million kidneys from? So all this brings us to the fact that unless we go back and improve that earlier slide and show that people are under control, you're not going to get anywhere. And therefore, that becomes the top priority. Now, the goals of diabetes therapy is what I've simplified it, and I call it as the ABCD. A stands for A1C, which should be below 7%. Blood pressure should be less than 140/90. Cholesterol, LDL cholesterol should be at least less than 100. And then, of course, D is discipline, which is in the patient's hands, in the person's hands, where diet, exercise, no smoking or tobacco, moderation alcohol use, stress reduction, and regularity of follow-up. Most important is you go back and see your doctor again and again to check the ABC. Now, if you don't achieve this, you will not be able to prevent the complication of diabetes. I would submit to you that if you just focus on this ABC, which is not difficult at all, at least in those who know that they have diabetes, I believe that the complications of diabetes are eminently preventable, and that we can ultimately have a diabetes complications-free India, which is something which I've been dreaming about and talking about increasingly these days. Now, if we look at the ABC and see how much are we achieving it. This is an earlier study published in 2020, where only 2 cities, Nikhil Tandon from All India Institute and our center, this is the CARS study, which Madam mentioned when introducing me, large sample size, about 15,000 people. Now, if you look at the A, B, C, D, leave the D was for smoking. We took only smoking, that big list of D that I told you. We didn't even look at diet, exercise, just looked at non-smokers. And then you should have achieved the A, B, C. Only 7% of people in India in these 2 large cities, Delhi and Chennai, were able to achieve the A, B, C, D. And that was an eye-opener for us. And we said we have to do this in India now, because this is the status in 2 large cities. How is it in India? And therefore, this study, which I told you, which is being published tonight at 11:30 tonight, the embargo on this will be published. And so I'm showing you unpublished results for the first time. Please don't take any pictures of this. And if you do, please don't share it until midnight today, because only tomorrow the world is supposed to see this. I'm just giving a sneak preview on this. It's getting published today in the Lancet Diabetes, where we have looked at the whole country, state by state, and looked at how much of blood pressure control, glucose control, and cholesterol control is there in India. And the overall interpretation is that achievement of targets is suboptimal in India. What we did was we had a color coding. And if the A1C is below 7, they got good. Blood pressure 140/90, they got good, and so on. Cholesterol, triglyceride, HDL, smoking, alcohol, fruit and vegetable intake, and physical activity. If they were somewhere in between, we gave them an orange or pink. And then if it was really poor, A1C more than 9, blood pressure more than 160/100, and so on and so forth. If they're smoking, more percentages more, and so on, we gave them red. So we're able to now color code the whole country. I don't think anyone anywhere in the world has color coded a whole country, but we've been able to do that. And what we found was now you can go from Andhra Pradesh to Arunachal Pradesh to Assam to West Bengal, okay, in alphabetical order there. And you can see these are people with known diabetes detected in the survey. And then they already know that they have diabetes. So we're not gone and looked at the unknown diabetes. We looked at the known diabetes. Are they achieving their ABC target? So we have A1C, we have systolic blood pressure, diastolic blood pressure, cholesterol, LDL, smoking, the whole thing. All the reds here means that they are in terrible control, okay? And some of them, there is green, which shows that they are achieving some target. In some states, some things are being achieved. But the majority you can see is dominated by the pink and the red, showing that how much work is to be done. And certain areas we're not doing well at all. Look at physical activity. There's not a single green anywhere. The whole country, there's only red and pink all over. Certain others, HbA1c, not a single state which has achieved the 7% target, not even a single state, okay? And so on and so forth. So now we have the whole country. So look for this paper tomorrow morning. It should be available online, and you can look at your state and see where you stand with respect to all the targets in the country. Now, the question you may ask is, that's all fine, Dr. Mohan, but aren't you just being rhetoric about this? And aren't you just, saying that, okay, if you control all this, long and healthy life is possible? No, it's not possible. Diabetes is a disease, people will get complications, Our average lifespan is 67 years for males and 69 years for females. So diabetic people won't live beyond 60, isn't it? So what are you talking? All this A, B, C, D and all that. Do you really believe in it? This is the paper for which I got the Harold Rifkin Award, because it's the first and the only study that I know of in the world which is reported on long-term survivors and non-survivors with type 2 diabetes. We had a series of patients, I think 238, who had lived for at least 40 years and were alive with type 2 diabetes. And we reported on, I'm not going to go into details of this, but this is a very, very important paper where we compare the survivors and the non-survivors, and we saw what was different between these two. And that is how I got my ABCD mantra. Turned out that is the A1C, blood pressure, and cholesterol. So again and again, the ABC is coming back. As long as you focus on the ABC, the A1C, the blood pressure, and the cholesterol, all the three, if they are controlled, people are able to live long lives. And therefore, here we're talking about 40-year survival and some even 50-year survival with type 2 diabetes. Still today, it has not been published anywhere else in the world. It was published in 2013. 10 years later, we still don't have any other paper from any other part of the world. That, you may say, is just duration of diabetes. You said just now that 60 years, 70 years and all that. Can you show that people can live up to 90 years, 100 years? Yes, I can. Now, here is a series of people, 325 people, who have crossed 90 years of diabetes with type 2 diabetes. Again, the first report in the world showing that people can live more than 90 years. And again, the same message came, the ABC, it came. And in case you didn't believe it, here is just a group of these people. Some of them you may know, Professor Chitti Babu, for example, the famous vice chancellor of several universities. You may know Mr. Sabanayagam, who was a chief secretary of Tamil Nadu. He has worked with several prime ministers and chief ministers of Tamil Nadu and the prime ministers. He's still alive, by the way. He'll be 100 this year. Professor Chitti Babu crossed 100. When he took this picture, he was already 100 years old. All these people here are minimum 95 years old. And you can see that they're all doing extremely well. Many of them are going to cross 100 years of age. I think even if my father at about 20 years ago, lost him a few years ago, unfortunately, but I don't think he would even imagine that a person with diabetes can live up to 100 years of age. So we've been honoring these people and showing the world that people can live up to 100 years of age. But the thing is, they achieved their ABC targets. Now, why is diabetes increasing so rapidly? Now I'm coming to the nutrition part, okay? So we know that the South Asian phenotype means that you get diabetes at a younger age group in India, lower BMI, you don't have to be fat to get diabetes, even thin people get it. There is some amount of insulin resistance, which we showed in 1986 in this Diabetology paper. There's a rapid decline in beta cell function. This is what Dr. Venkat Narayan and I have been showing in our studies. This, I'm sure you all know. We have the lowest HDL reported in any ethnic group in the world. And we have the highest triglyceride, and small dense LDL is also increased. But this low HDL is so characteristic. Why is it? Is it genetic or is it environmental? We don't know. It's probably both. And of course, there are many others which you all know. The low B12, which Dr. Yajnik has talked about. I think he was a former orator of yours. The low vitamin D, which all of you know. And several Yajniks, again, the low birth weight, thin fat Indian. I'm not going to go into all of these, but this abdominal obesity and visceral fat producing this insulin resistance and making us get diabetes at a younger age has been called as the Indian phenotype or the South Asian phenotype. Question is it genetic or is it environmental? Dr. Radha and team from our center, we've been working for the last 20-25 years trying to look at the genetics of both type 2 diabetes, insulin resistant, dyslipidemia, low HDL. We've been studying everything. In fact, we've come up with some study. This is a Nature Genetics paper, which we are involved in, where we showed 6 new genes which have been associated with diabetes only in South Asians. not in Chinese, not in Japanese, not in white Caucasian population, not in anyone else. Only these genes are associated with type 2 diabetes only in South Asians. But are this is the reason why we are getting so much of diabetes? Definitely not. The LOD scores are so small that they are unique, but they are not the reason why we are getting diabetes. In fact, if you think about it, I showed you that first slide where the type 2 diabetes was, where diabetes was 2% in urban areas. And I said that is now increased to 25%. Now, this is in our lifetime. 1970s. I was already working with my father when it happened, when it was 2%. I have seen this evolve from 2% to 25%. Are you suggesting that all the genes changed in the last 40 years? All our genes changed? Nothing changed. Maybe some epigenetic changes have taken place. The genes are still the same. What changed is the environment. Okay, and that has changed very rapidly. If you look at it, previously we were carrying loads on our head. Today, what do we carry? Cell phones only we carry on our head. Okay, children used to play in the field. I definitely used to play in the field and in the playground. Today, everybody is hooked to video games. They're playing virtual football. They're not playing this. How many children go out and play today? They don't. We used to eat frugal meals. Okay, we didn't have that much food to eat. In 1960s, we used to get the ships coming from US under the PL 480 scheme, bringing wheat to India. And I remember some of the headlines. India has food for 2 more weeks. Okay, and if the ship doesn't come, India is going to starve. Okay. Today, we can export food. In fact, we're exporting food to Sri Lanka and to other places as we speak. So a complete transformation has taken place. Thanks to MS Swaminathan and thanks to Professor Gopalan and thanks to all of you who have made this nutrition revolution. But what has happened is, in the process, from 1991, when India opened its economy, we became a free economy and people started investing, foreign investment started coming in and our lifestyle changed. So what do these youngsters do? Now they are working in call centers for US timing. So what are they doing? Whole night they're working for American timing. They're paid in dollars. They're all paid very well, but their sleep is gone. They get junk food. That's all they can get at 2 a.m. What are they going to get? They're going to get idli and sambar at 2 o'clock in the morning. So what you're going to get is junk food. So they start eating a lot of these junk foods, high in calorie, high in fat. So what happens is excess carbohydrate. As it is, we are a carb nation, too much of carbs. But now our glycemic load is going up, physical activity is going down because they're always sitting like this, and urbanization. I'm not even touching on the third one because pollution, pesticides, and so many other new things are coming in about which I don't yet have solid data. Maybe in a future meeting, we'll talk about that. But at least two. Let's look at these two, the carbs and the physical activity. Few years ago, in 2010, I wrote this editorial in IJMR, where it was just an idea. And I said, can the diabetes cardiovascular epidemic in India be explained at least in part by excess refined rice intake? We had no data at that time. It was just a concept. You know, the beta cells being, put to overwork because of excess carbs. They're running out, and therefore they run out and they get diabetes. And also because of that, inflammation and producing insulin resistance, obesity due to that. Rice is the most common thing in the south, and in the north it can be wheat. It was a hypothesis. We then decided to test that hypothesis, and this was a paper which we published a few years ago in British Journal of Nutrition, where we looked at dietary carbohydrate in a cross-sectional study, the CURE study, large sample size, but looking at cross-sectionally whether there's any relationship to diabetes. And as you can see, if you look at the glycemic load, and this is predominantly coming from white rice in Chennai, and if you take the first quartile of the glycemic load, which is 198 grams per day of rice, and you take that as the odds ratio for diabetes as 1, by the time you go to the fourth quartile and you take 400 grams, that means just double your carbohydrate intake, your odds ratio goes up by 4.25 times, which means if your prevalence is 6% here, it's 24% there. If it's 8% here, it's 32% there. Okay, so that's the kind of increase. It's not a gentle increase, it's a huge increase. We have corrected for all the factors we could correct, including BMI, age, gender, physical activity, income, everything we tried to correct. But you're always in a cross-sectional study. There could be other confounders which you can't correct for. So you may say, well, this is suggestive, but it doesn't prove. So what do you need for that? You need a prospective study. So here are more data from that same study showing that pretty convincing. If you look at carbohydrate from first quartile to fourth quartile, diabetes goes up, glycemic load, glycemic index, and dietary fiber showing the opposite. So we were convinced at that time, but it's very difficult to convince everybody based on a cross-sectional study. So more fiber you take, less diabetes you have. So we concluded that total dietary carbohydrate glycemic load associated with increase in dietary fiber decreased risk of type 2 diabetes. But then we needed the prospective follow-up study. And that's where the PURE study, which Madam mentioned, came. Working with Salim Yusuf, we started the PURE study in Bangalore and St. John's, and then 4 other sites, including Chennai, got added. Today, we have almost 200 to 250,000 people in about 20-25 countries, followed up now for more than 15 years. So this becomes the largest epidemiological study ever done in the world. And this area of diabetes is of interest to me. So my student Baudarani and we took up this, and we looked at 132,000 people in 21 countries and looked at the white rice intake and incident diabetes. At baseline, they did not have diabetes. We excluded all of them and said how many people developed diabetes and was it related to rice intake. Now that's the rice intake, and you can see South Asia with India, Bangladesh, and so on included in this, taking 630 grams of cooked rice, whereas it is much lower in the other countries. So South Asia standing out as the rice eating population. And if you look at the odds for incident diabetes, the hazards ratio is 1.61. That means 61% more diabetes in countries where the rice is taken more. You may say, what happened to China? Well, China has changed its eating habits quite a lot. The rice has come down, the type of rice they have changed. So China is a bit of an outlier here. Earlier studies 10 years ago were showing a strong association. Today, it's only a weak association. In all parts of the world, if you consume the rice, it is strong. But in South Asia, where you consume more rice, very strong association with type 2 diabetes. What about physical activity? Now, if you are physically inactive, the hazard ratio is 1.5. If you're physically active, then it comes down to 1.16. So you can see already prevention starting here, which I'll be going to later. So we concluded in the study that higher consumption of white rice is associated with increased risk of incident diabetes, with the strongest association being observed in South Asia. Now, a few other studies which we have done at our center, we started looking at how much of polishing should you do for the glycemic index to go up. Turns out that this is fully polished white rice. This is under milled rice. That means only some amount of polishing has taken place. You can see already it's quite high. So if you begin to polish, it goes up. Whereas brown rice, it's only 57. So it's much lower. So even minimal polishing of Indian parboiled rice leads to increased glycemic responses. That's what we showed. Again, we have had the opportunity to look at various cooked items, uttappam, plain cooked rice, khichdi, upma, and so on. At every item in the cooked food that you see, if you make it with white rice and you make it brown rice, you get a lower glycemic index with the brown rice. This is a very important paper published last year in January. And I know that Sumati Swaminathan is also there in this audience, and she's part of this. And David Jenkins, of course, drove the study along with Mashid Degan. Now, here what we looked at is that, okay, we know that glycemic index and glycemic load are linked to diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and so on. But is there any link with mortality? Which means if you have a high glycemic index and glycemic load, do you die due to that? This was the first and only paper I know of published in NEGM last year, where we showed that a diet with a high glycemic index was associated with increased risk of cardiovascular disease and death. So glycemic load is important. I know a lot of people don't believe in glycemic index at all. They say, oh, that's all rubbish. There's no glycemic index, glycemic load. If people are dying due to a higher glycemic index, glycemic load, come on, you have to give some importance to that. We can't just brush it under the carpet and say that glycemic index is not important. Of course, it's important. Now, if you substitute brown rice with white rice, we did an RCT with Vasanthi Malik taking the lead from Harvard, and Kamala Krishnami, as you can see, is there as one of the authors. And we looked at what happens. Now, what happens is in red is the white rice. Now, this is continuous glucose monitoring. You put a patch on your hand and then you see your continuous glucose monitoring. You can see that day by day, the red shows the white rice. And in a crossover trial, you can see when you substitute with brown rice, you can see that the glucose levels are much lower. The area under the curve is much lower with brown rice. We add legumes, it further goes down, and fasting insulin goes down. and you can see that the HbA1c, especially those who have metabolic syndrome and insulin resistance, you can see that the A1c is coming down. The CRP is also going down, C-reactive protein, whereas with white rice, it is going up, showing that subclinical inflammation can also be reduced if you take brown rice. Now, is the type of carbohydrate important? So far, we spoke about the quantity of carbohydrate. What about the quality of carbohydrate? They're also very important because there are bad carbs and good carbs. All of us know that sweetened drinks, fruit juice, highly polished white rice, white bread, cookies, ice cream, candy, chocolate, potato chips, French fries, these are all the bad carbs, and they're obviously to be restricted or avoided. But there are also good carbs, vegetables, which you can eat as much as you want, whole fruits, legumes, kidney beans, peas, lentils, nuts, seeds, whole grains, brown rice, steel cut oats, quinoa. All these are better. If you're going to take carbs, take the good carbs. What about nuts? You know, I'll tell you a story. When I was a third-year student, I just entered the clinical ward, and one of my teachers asked me, what is the best way of committing suicide? He asked, not asked me, he asked all the students, what's the best way of committing suicide? We thought probably this guy wants to kill himself or something. Then we said, sir, hanging probably is good. Then one fellow said, no, jump off from the, from big building. One fellow said, walk into the sea. He said, no, it's very simple. Just eat about 6 cashew nut every day. In 3 months, you'll die, he said. It created such a big impact on me. Imagine a third-year student, you're listening to this from a professor, and he's telling you that your LDL will go up so high that you'll die. Best way to commit suicide, he said. So that it stuck in my mind until we started studying nuts. Okay. So here is a paper we published in Journal of Nutrition 2018, where it's an RCT, where we looked at cashew nut consumption. And what we reported was that even if you just take a handful of cashew every day, it improves the HDL cholesterol and reduces the systolic blood pressure. Major paper, you can read it. We had Walt Willett and others, and of course, Madam Kamala Prasamy is also there as author on this paper. And you can see that in the intervention group, you can see the blood pressure falling by almost 5 millimeters of mercury compared to the conventional control arm, which did not receive. And the HDL cholesterol, we talked about the low HDL in Indians. Here is one way of increasing the HDL, only by 2 milligrams. Even after that, it doesn't increase. Somehow resistant we are to the low HDL, but some increase, whereas in the control group, no increase at all. So we concluded that the cashew nut is not bad at all. It doesn't kill you. You don't have to commit suicide using that. In fact, it's healthier, probably make you live longer. So my professor is totally wrong in what he said. Here is another study which under publication now, not yet complete. We're studying all the nuts, by the way. And here is a study, this is of course sponsored by the Almond Board of California, but it doesn't, our sponsorship has nothing to do with the results. That much I can tell you. Like we tell them, if you get bad results, we'll publish it, okay? And that's a risk you take by coming to people like us. So here again, we're studying the effect on insulin resistance, 43 grams of almond per day given for 3 months. Is that, okay, I'm not showing the pistachio data. We're also doing studies on pistachio. In the interest of time, moving on about fad diets. What about keto diets and paleo diets and intermittent fasting? Just today, there's a paper in New England Journal of Medicine published, some of you would have seen it, that intermittent fasting, which we all rave about so much, had no benefit over a non-intermittent fasting calorie restricted diet, which means that if you restrict the calories, in intermittent fasting, it's only the calories which is causing that. And if you just do intermittent fasting without calorie restricting, or if you compare it with calorie restriction without intermittent fasting, you're not getting any benefit at all. That paper was just published today. Now, what about other fad diets, keto diet? So we wrote about this, Shilpa Joshi and I, probably Shilpa is in the audience. We wrote about this ketogenic diet in IJMR. And we said that, well, it gives you short-term benefits, but it's not sustainable in the long run. And so in the same article, we said, don't do all this. What you do is you cut down the carbohydrate. We're taking 70-75% carbohydrate. Cut it to 45-50%. That is enough. And use complex carbohydrate, whole grains, good carbs, which I told you about. If you can take brown rice, whole wheat, that's good. Otherwise, at least cut it down. Make 20% at least protein. If you can 20-25% is a tall claim, but if you can get at least 20% and use vegetable protein, much better, legumes, pulses and others. And the remaining comes from healthy fats, which includes monounsaturated fats, some polyunsaturated fats. And we have shown that groundnut oil and mustard oil, nuts and seeds, I already showed you the data, along with plenty of green leafy vegetables. This, in my humble opinion, would be the best diet for an Indian. Not a fad diet, not a zero carb diet. Nothing zero is good in life. You need to have moderation in everything. Let me just move on briefly to physical activity. In a separate paper published in Diabetic Medicine a few years ago, we showed that independent of the rice intake, those who had heavy activity in Chennai in 2005 had 5% diabetes. If you're sedentary, it became 17%. So here is a clear indication. This is after adjusting for rice intake. So a second major risk factor for diabetes is physical inactivity. So if you want to prevent diabetes, diet and physical activity will be the top ones. And that's what we wrote in this paper. How much is preventable? A 10-year follow-up of the cures study where we looked at various factors. And what we showed was that if you had a good diet score and your physical inactivity was corrected, 50% of the population attributable risk of diabetes could be prevented. If you added BMI and abdominal obesity, it went up 70%. Of course, you treat the hypertriglyceridemia and low HDL, it will go to 80%. These are more difficult. Just stick to the first one. Diet, healthy diet, and physical activity, 50% of new onset of diabetes can be prevented. Can we start prevention earlier in the natural history of diabetes? Now, this is normal glucose tolerance. Then comes the stage of pre-diabetes. Then we have clinical diabetes, and then we have stage of complication. I purposely put this up because everybody today is talking about reversal of diabetes and remission of diabetes. Is it really possible? Well, diabetes by itself is a progressive disorder. But if you diagnose it early, let's say pre-diabetic stage, you can see the blue arrow going this way, you can actually reverse the diabetes by weight reduction, calorie restriction, physical activity, yoga, and so on and so forth. In the stage of clinical diabetes, more difficult, at least partial remission is possible probably. If you catch it early, then you can probably go back fully. As you go on with longer duration of diabetes, what we've seen is after 6 or 8 years duration, it gets increasingly difficult to reverse diabetes. And of course, you develop the complication diabetes, there's no way you can reverse it. You don't see the arrow there at all. So if you're interested in reversal, you should start there. But there's also prevention. Prevention is preventing from one stage to the other stage. And there we have excellent studies which we have done. And I want to show you two such studies. This is one of the first studies, epidemiological studies that I did in the 1990s, I think, where we took just two, before we went to the whole of Chennai, we just took two residential colonies. One was a middle income group and the other was a there's a low income group, a slum actually, and Tirumangalam and T Nagar. What we did was, we looked at the diabetes prevalence in these two. It's an intra-urban study for the first time again. And where we found that the middle income group had 12% diabetes. This is in 2001, 20 years ago. Okay. And in low income group to 6%. This is like the auto rickshaw drivers and others. And it was 6.5%. So it was half. So what we said was, these low income group people, they're not interested at all. They had alcohol problem, TB problem, this problem, that problem, typhoid problem. They were not interested to listen about diabetes and weight reduction and so on. First of all, they were thin to start with. So we said, let's focus on middle income group. That is 80% of Chennai. So we said, let's focus on this. So what we did was, we went to this colony, Asiad colony. And as you can see, this is Asiad colony. Just next door to them, there was a large piece of land. So we asked them, what are you going to do with this land? So they said, we're going to build Asiad colony number 2. So we said, instead of building Asiad colony number 2, why don't you build a park? Ask the government to build it for you. The government, they went to the government said, we have no money. Okay. So I said, you don't need the government. You know, let's all pool money and we'll build a park ourselves. People can, build a park. So they pooled their own resources. And this is the first time I know of in India where people built their own park. The government just gave permission and they built this beautiful park. The number of exercises in the colony went up dramatically. And we were able to change the lifestyle, not only of adults, but also children. As you can see, children didn't have a playground. There's nothing, no safe place. We were able to bring this back. This is true translational research. What happened was that the number of people who were exercising before the park was built was 13%. It went up to 52%. That's a solid 277% increase in exercises. Meanwhile, what happened was that diabetes is increasing in Chennai from 2%, which I showed you in the first figure. It's going up, up, up. Somewhere here, we went back. It's around 2008 or so. We went back. This is the latest I showed you, 22%. So somewhere here, we went back. And we studied some colonies near the Asiad colony that already crossed 20% there. So we said, okay, original figure was 12%. Let us see how much it has increased now. Because now they have been doing exercise, the real world research. So we said, if it has not gone up to 20%, it must be the effect of walking. And we did it by measuring the waist and measuring hip and measuring BMI and so on. So from this 12%, of course, some of you will think from 12, it went down to 6%. It cannot happen. because they are 12 years older. We're studying the same people. Age is a non-modifiable risk factor. So what happened to us? From 12%, a modest increase to 15%, whereas the colonies nearby where there was no park, they had already crossed 20%. So we had a tough time convincing the reviewers, but we said, we are sure that this decrease in 5% is because these people are doing exercise. And we were able to show how much exercise they did, that the waist didn't go up, all other things we were able to corroborate. But the bit and the bad news was with the low income group. You remember we left them alone because they were at 6%. So we said, okay, now let's go back to the low income group, 8%, 9%, you know, it's 2% here, must be 8%. We were shocked to find that they'd gone up to 15%. Remember I showed you about the reversal of the socioeconomic gradient? But this is 2011. What I showed you in India was much later. But this is the first shock for us, that the poor people are now getting diabetes. And you can see a huge increase, 135% increase. Now, this is not because we gave them steroids or gave them something. This is a natural evolution. Many of them have got a little bit more money. They bought scooters now, and therefore their socioeconomic status has changed a little bit, but they're still poor. And you can see that the poor are now getting more diabetes. So the title of this paper, which we published in American Journal, is The Convergence of Prevalence Rates in the Middle Income and Low Income Group. Now it's no longer convergence. The poor people are getting more diabetes. But this is an excellent example of translational research. Not only did we do epidemiology, we went back to the society, helped them to build their own park, and thereby help them to reduce their diabetes in these colonies. Once this Asiad colony success story is picked up by WHO and newspapers and magazines and Business India and everyone, lots of parks started coming. We had one in Harrington Road, we had one somewhere else, and all over India, parks started coming with people power. People started building their own parks. A kind of quiet revolution was started in physical activity and in improving health. Now, you may say, but that's not an RCT. You really have to do an RCT to prove that you can prevent diabetes. That's where Dr. Venkatnarayan, whom I mentioned earlier, and Ranjini Harish, who leads our translational research. You see Anjana there, and then Mary Beth and Lisa from Venkat's team from Emory. They all joined together, and we took this study, which is called as the DCLIP study, Diabetes Community Lifestyle Improvement Program, or the DCLIP program. What we did was we took about 600 people and put them into two groups. It's an RCT, one in a control group where they just get standard advice. The 24, the intervention group received 24 lifestyle classes focusing on physical activity, diet, cutting down on carbohydrate, and making dietary changes and so on. And this was published in Diabetes Care as a stepwise approach to prevention, randomized clinical trial. And you can see that in the pre-diabetes groups, there's something new that we learned. Those who had IGT, either had impaired glucose tolerance or impaired fasting glucose with IGT, there we could prevent diabetes, 31 to 36% reduction in incidence of diabetes. But we had only a fasting being high, even by exercise, and even after adding metformin in those who failed, who did not get their sugars under control, we were not able to prevent diabetes. So we understood for the first time again in the world that IFG is different from IGT as far as prevention of diabetes is concerned. So our conclusion was that stepwise diabetes prevention can effectively reduce diabetes incidence by a third. So we are proving that you can actually prevent diabetes, but people with isolated impaired fasting glucose may require different interventions. Now, the last part of my talk, I'm going to move to the rural areas. Madam mentioned about rural areas. Now, 72% of our population, maybe it's come down now, 60%, live in rural areas. That means India lives in villages, as Mahatma Gandhi said. But unfortunately, 75% of the doctors practice in urban areas. So this complete mismatch between where people live and where people practice is going on. Of course, the government is trying very hard to change these. But in rural areas, you have lack of awareness, access problems, poverty, lack of specialized diabetes care, and so on. So when my wife was there, she came to me and she said, no, Mohan, we have to do something for rural India. We at least develop a model which the rest of India can then take. So we said, okay, let's make the 6A test possible. What is the 6A test? Make diabetes care available, accessible, affordable, appropriate, acceptable, and accountable in rural India. There was no model anywhere in the world. So we had to again innovate. How do we do that? We couldn't get doctors to go there because they won't go. They'll say, oh, there's no school there, no electricity there, no water there. We are not going there. So we said, okay, you don't go. We will make it without you. So then at that time, I got a call from the zamindar of a village in Kanchipuram district, in the southern part of Kanchipuram district, in Chunampet, a village. He had a large tract of land. There was a bachelor and he's giving away all his land to government and so on. So he called me and he said, I want to give you some land and do something for our people. So I said, okay, we'll set up the Chunampet model for rural diabetes care in Chunampet. So your Chunampet will become world famous. I didn't even know where Chunampet was, but this model will become very famous. We went to the World Diabetes Federation in Denmark, and they gave us some van and so on, which I'll show you. ISRO gave us a big satellite. So with that, we set up this van, which is like a mobile hospital. It has facilities for screening, for diabetes checking, eye check, everything can be done, ECG, Doppler, and so on. And this video will show you what we do. So we go to huts like this and talk to these men and women. Now, incidentally, young men and women who are high school dropouts are picked up. They are trained in epidemiology and trained in diabetes care and screening and so on. So they can check the blood pressure, they can check the sugars. We don't need a doctor to do that. And after screening in their household itself, the van goes to the village, screens everyone in the village. The van is parked there. If they have diabetes, all they have to do is to bring the lady into the van, where we can do all the specialized tests, like looking at the feet, biotisymmetry. We can look for cataract. We can take pictures of the eye. That picture can be sent by satellite. Now we can send it even without satellite to our base hospital in Gopalapuram, where Dr. Prathipa, our ophthalmologist in this case, is talking to that lady inside the van and telling her what we did. That's the eye, that is cataract, lens, this is retina that we're looking for, talking to them. In the land which he gave us, we built, my wife and I donated the entire money for this, and we built the Sai Rural Diabetes Center. The doctor whom you just saw there was practicing nearby there. We took him, Dr. Rakesh, and he's still working for me, and for the last 10, 15 years or so. And then we brought him to Chennai, trained him in diabetes, and put him back there in his own village. So this is an excellent example of what Dr. Abdul Kalam had dreamed about. What he said is Pura, providing urban amenities in rural areas. Pura, he called it. This is an example of Pura. So the results were fascinating. We were able to take 42 villages, which the Tamil Nadu government said, you take them, and then you look after them. So, and beyond that also we went, diabetes awareness to 200,000 people. Through the van, we go and give awareness. We screen the entire adult population of these villages completely free of cost. And then we picked up those with diabetes, screened them all for complications, got the rural data on retinopathy, neuropathy, nephropathy, which is not there for many developing country today. And using very low cost treatment medicines like metformin or sulfonylureas, the cheapest ones, generic ones, we're able to bring down the A1C of the whole population, not just of one person, from 9.3 to 8.5. That's quite impressive. That those villages now, the diabetes control has improved a lot. So this became known as the Chunampet Rural Project. And the Lancet in 2011 wrote a series of 5 articles on India. And they wrote to us and said, we want to highlight the Chunampet rural. In fact, the Arvind Eye and the Chunampet rural diabetes were picked up among chronic diseases. And they asked us to write a piece about it. And what they concluded was that the Chunampet Rural Diabetes Project thus seems to be a good model for delivering preventive and therapeutic diabetes healthcare to rural areas. Very quickly, this model was adapted in other places. This attracted the whole world. So we had CNN, Discovery Channel, BBC, Le Monde in France. This book, Jugad, had a whole chapter on the Chunampet. BBC came, even business magazines came. First they said, but you're making loss. I said, it's not a loss. You're serving people. So it's no question of loss when you're doing something free for people. So they also wrote an article. So this Chunampet project became a kind of model project. The government also liked it, and it's been adopted. So I would like to end, ladies and gentlemen, by saying that these are my take-home messages for you. The diabetes epidemic in India is still spiraling upwards. The South Asian phenotype is responsible for the high prevalence of diabetes ethnic group. Diets in India are very high in carbohydrate, 70%, and lack sufficient protein, fiber, fruits, and vegetables. Excess carbs and calories coupled with physical inactivity are the main drivers of the diabetes epidemic, as I showed you. Reducing the carbohydrate intake to 40 to 50%, increasing the protein content and the rest from healthy fats, along with plenty of green leafy vegetables and some fruit, can help to prevent and control NCDs like diabetes. And we showed this in the DCLIP project. The DCLIP trial showed that it's preventable, eminently preventable. And the Chunampet Rural Diabetes Project model can thus be applied to serve the rural community in India. All we have to do is to adopt this and to keep scaling it up. I think it's quite scalable. Now, Jagdish Chandra Bose said that when one dedicates himself, and I would say herself also, wholly for a great object or a great cause, the closed doors shall open. He didn't say it may open. He said it shall open, and the seemingly impossible will become possible for him. Okay, it's a very powerful statement. And as a spiritual person myself, I believe this. You know, we had just talked about the Chunampet rural, we just talked about rural India, and I get this call from the Zamindar of Chunampet offering us the land. Every time you think of doing something good for people, there is some kind of a divine thing which will come, and in your hand it comes, as if you have done it. You're not done it at all, but you only thought about it, and then immediately, here, okay, you want to do it? Here it is. So I would urge all of you all, even if it's small things, please keep doing it, because then the seemingly impossible will become possible. And who better to exemplify that than Dr. Gopalan? He has made impossible things possible in India. Okay, he set up the National Institute of Nutrition. How many countries in India have a National Institute of Nutrition? He set up the Nutrition Society of India. He has, found out the cause of letharism, which nobody knew. He found out that kwashiorkor and marasmus, what is the etiology? He was able to eliminate all of them. And he also went quite a bit into non-communicable diseases, his work on atherosclerosis, cholesterol. There's no aspect of nutrition which he has not touched. Above all, he has trained all of you all. This cadre of people who are all sitting around here, some of the best nutritionists in the world, are all world leaders thanks to visionaries like him. And I think Professor Gopalan beautifully exemplifies that quote from J.P. Bose. And the fact that we are living in India and all this is possible in India is something that we are making in India, that we can be very proud of, and therefore, Jai Hind and thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mohan, for this wonderful, excellent talk. And with, you exemplify humility and modesty. Wonderful, and hearty congratulations once again. You deserve the most this award. And standing ovation.
Thank you so much.
And I would like to quote here, Vivekananda once said, if you dedicate yourself wholeheartedly to some cause without any selfish motive behind, the whole universe will conspire to help you. And that's very truly said in the last quote that you have mentioned. Thank you so much. And once again, congratulations.
I've used that quote a lot in my autobiography as well, because every time you think of something, if it is not for if it's a selfish cause, it'll just go away. And it looks as if, we are talking philosophy here, but it's truth. And sometimes you have to just accept the truth. And sometimes they'll ask you, okay, what is the mechanism of action of that? I said that in life, you don't know the mechanism of action of many things, but we didn't even know the mechanism of action of metformin, but for 50 years, we've used the drug and it's worked. Even today, we're trying to find out how metformin works. So we don't need to know the mechanism of action for everything. As long as you have trust and faith, a lot of things will happen.
Output.
So if you give me just 1 minute time here, I would like to add, you were emphasizing the fact that we should get calories only from carbohydrates to the extent of 50%. But it is very difficult for lay people and even for educated people to understand how to get only 50% from carbs. So here in NIN, we have developed My Plate for the Day and our dietary guidelines also. Here we have devised that and say that you have to limit your calories from cereals to 30%, at the most maximum 40%, so that when you calculate, it automatically comes to 50% carbs. So that's one plate we have devised, and very soon, the dietary guidelines is going to be released soon with that kind of.
Very happy that we agree on.
Thank you, sir. Yes, please.
See, you said brown red rice. In India, this was the case earlier. Now less than 1% people are using brown red. Whether it is rich or poor, they are going for polished rice. Now agriculture people are revising low glycemic index rice. They are growing that
They
bag.
also have.
And efforts are being made to reduce the glycemic index. And that will be the solution in future. And you can reduce the glycemic index, whatever rice you eat, it will be good for the health. That's what is going on. In our university, they have produced this less glycemic index rice, and they are popularizing it. And a day will come, we'll have rice with less glycemic index. That helps. As you said, that 50% with less glycemic index, that is the most important part of it. That's what I wanted.
Thank you.
I entirely agree with you, sir, because the concept of brown rice, although in the trial we showed that there was improvement, the sensory testing when we did and we asked people, they said it's chewing is difficult, cooking is difficult, it becomes rancid, it doesn't stay in the shop well, it doesn't look nice, it doesn't taste nice. They hate it. They say like a medicine we can take it, but otherwise we can't take it. So while that was our ancients what they ate, today to go back to that is not easy. And same thing with millets and so on. Millets are very good, but change everything back to millets for the whole population is a great challenge, although we should try to do what we can do. But as you rightly said, if you restrict the cereals, and especially if you add the vegetables and if you add the protein, if you add the pulses, which was what Dr. Gopalan's book taught me, in Nutritive Value of Indian Foods, clearly shown that one amino acid is absent in rice, one is absent in the pulses, but excess of that is present in the other. So if you take it together, you get the good quality protein, which is what Mr. Gopalan taught. So I think we have to make our own local adjustments, and India is not one. You may not even have one solution for whole country, but definitely some reduction in carbohydrate, some increase in fiber and protein, lots of green leafy vegetables to be added, because we also have a lot of B12 deficiency and others in some parts of India at least, especially among the vegetarians. So I think in one shot, we can get all these fulfilled if we just have to make some changes. I know it's not easy to make it, but if we continuously keep talking about it, our country does adapt very fast. How did we adapt to Zoom? How did we adapt to cell phones? How do we adapt to everything else? Online teaching we're able to do. You think a little bit of change in the diet is not possible? Everything is possible. But I think we all have to give the consistent message and give it to people. Slowly they will adapt. It takes time, but it's possible.
Just one, Dr. Mohan. Hello.
Yes. Sir.
Am I audible? I am Farooq Ali from Bihar, Bhagalpur.
Yes, sir.
Just one. I will appreciate your presentation. So nicely presented and well documented and well thought over. I want to know that GDP versus diabetes, poverty versus development, urbanization. So what could be the possible ways that our GDP also increases and diabetes decreases? But one thing surprises me. I would like to know from you that why medical fraternity is always stressing upon the non-productive labor, that is exercise. You cited an example of one colony which was developed by the people, and the difference in the ongoing increase in the diabetes was more than 5%. So why not the productive labor is promoted by the medical fraternity, say doing the housework, doing the gardening work, doing their own work? Why they are implying the people? Because Tamil Nadu, they have more laborer from Bihar. Even Andhra Pradesh has got more laborer from Bihar. Delhi has also more laborer from Bihar. They are not doing
Thank you.
So I'll briefly answer that. See, exercise is of many types. It's not just walking, jogging, swimming, tennis, and badminton is not the only tennis. If you are able to work and in your work bring about your steps, either if you're an agriculturist or if you're working in an airport where you have to walk up and down, it doesn't matter. Physical activity, movement. Apart from that, of course, our muscles are also important. We have to bring in some resistance training and build. Otherwise, sarcopenia is setting in. Flexibility is very important, where yoga and all that comes in. So there is no one size fits all. But what in general, we bring it all under physical activity. Now, the question that you said was, why don't we just ask our laborers to continue to do labor? The problem is our farmers are now sitting on tractors and they are moving about. They are not plowing the field anymore. So it is changing. And that is why when in Chunampet, when we ask people to walk, they said, walk? What walk? We are walking the whole day. But then we told them you were working the whole day. Now you're sitting on a tractor and going, you're putting on weight. Your ancestors were not like that. Then they understood. And for the first time, walking and all that started in a village where the concept of physical activity came. So the whole concept is do it, act locally, do as you want to do. There's no one size fits all. I'm not saying everybody go to the gym and do on a treadmill. I'm not saying that. But where it has to be done, the importance of physical activity in bringing down cardiovascular disease, diabetes, hypertension, obesity and even some forms of cancer can be prevented by that.
You have not stressed the importance. You have not stressed the importance of millets. Would it help to? Also, would it help if you replace rice with wheat, chapatis instead of rice?
No, madam, because the prevalence of diabetes I showed you in Delhi and Chennai was the same. Delhi is wheat eating, Chennai is rice eating. There was no difference. The problem with wheat is that is also refined wheat. Wheat has also got refined. Millets are very good, no doubt about it. First of all, they are in short supply. Second is that the millets are also polished now. The millets are not, you're not the old millets you're not talking about now. They are also polished. They have high GI. So if you get a low GI millet, now again, will the population completely change over to millets? Many people say, without my rice, I cannot live. So I think the point made earlier was that restrict eat what you want. You want millets, eat millet. You want wheat, eat millet, eat wheat. If you want rice, eat rice. But restrict whichever carbs you take, you restrict little bit. You're not saying zero carbs, not at all. Reduce little bit, as I said, 1/3 or half or whatever, and add something else so that your satiety is also maintained. Plus you're getting your B12 and iron and everything else that you want to get from your nutrition, fiber and everything, protein, you're getting everything else. So then it becomes a fully balanced diet. Then our diet, nothing wrong with our Indian diet at all. Once you increase the fiber and increase the protein and add some vegetables.
There is no question answer, sir. In this oration, there is no question answers. We are closing, sir. No, please.
Thank you so much for your inspirational thoughts.
We have to respect
Adapa is
our
going to give the vote of thanks. Thank you, sir.
right.
Good evening to all. It gives me immense pleasure to perform the present duty to propose vote of thanks. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Mohan, an internationally renowned diabetologist, for accepting to deliver the 45th GOPALAN Oration Award lecture despite his busy schedule. I would also like to thank the members of the Board of Trustees for choosing Dr. V. Mohan, Chairman, Dr. Mohan Diabetes Specialty Center, and Director, Madras Diabetes Research Foundation, as the orator for the 45th GOPALAN Oration for the year 2021. At the outset, I express my sincere thanks to all the members who have attended today's oration lecture and made it a grand success. Once again, I am thanking you all for making the occasion a grand success. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm deeply honored and humbled. Thank you.
Right, sir. Thank you.
Bye-bye, sir. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you all for all the kindness shown.
Thank you.
Thank you.